Picture this. The journey ahead starts here together, and together we can build a brighter future. You are listening to Illuminating Hope, a podcast of Hope House. Julie Ross is Vice President of Client Services, Segment Head for Empower. Her role serves as Head of Client Service Manager, supporting associates, ERISA consultants, and project managers who serve clients in a large, mega, and non-for-profit segments. Julie joined the organization in 2000 and has 23 years of experience managing diverse teams across operations, sales, and client services. She is an active member of the company's business resource groups and serves as executive sponsor for the Empowering Young Professionals Business Resource Group. Julie holds a bachelor's degree from Baker University. She currently maintains the Project Management Professional certification from the Project Management Institute and has completed the Leadership Overland Park, Kansas program, as well as the Great West LifeCo Leadership Accelerated Development Program. Julie also serves as Chair Emeritus of Hope House Executive Committee. Julie, welcome to the Illuminating Hope podcast.
Thank you. So great to be here.
Well, I have to tell you, it is so courageous for you to come on and be a voice of a survivor and a childhood survivor of domestic violence. What is your earliest childhood memory of domestic violence?
I was fairly young as we were going through this, so I was the baby of the family, and so a lot of the experiences kind of faded over the years because I was so young, but I absolutely do have some pretty young memories, and those memories that I do have were fairly vivid. So some of the events and the experiences that actually took place, probably around age 5 or 6 is what I probably remember the most, but I know that there were incidents that had occurred before then, but that's in general how far back I can remember.
Do you still remember how they made you feel?
Confusion, large in part. Scared, I think, would be another clear emotion. When I think about some of the events, like even to this day, that I still have vivid memories from the experiences, I can tell you that I remember loud noises. I remember breaking glass. I remember yelling. I even remember a vivid event where my father had waved a gun in my mom's face in front of all of us children. So those are the types of things that still kind of haunt me over the years. But I think one of my biggest memories from way back then is maybe the one that was most challenging for me was my mother used to have to take sleeping pills to be able to get through the trauma. And when I could not wake her, for me, that's when I knew that things just were not. This was not a normal circumstance. This was not something that goes on in a home. When you hear things like that or when you go through experiences like that, you know that it's not normal. And for me, it was very confusing. It was very emotional. But yet I didn't understand because I was so young. I think for my siblings who were all older than me, they were going through obviously different emotions than I probably would have been, I guess, at that age.
I would imagine just listening to you talk about that, putting yourself in a 5 or 6-year-old mindset, how scary that had to be. Confusion, of course, but with that confusion comes this fear because your mom is the one who's protecting you and taking care of you.
That's right.
And if you can't wake her up, the fear that would bring out, it would just be terrifying.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, she honestly was my lifeline my entire life from right birth even till this day. So going through that experience at that point in time was really hard because I needed her to be able to be there for me. And, when I couldn't wake her, and eventually she absolutely would surface from bed or whatever the situation was. And she was just as loving of a mother, right, when she was awake as I can describe. So she met my needs. It's just there were things, right, that would go on, and watching her go through some of that were really difficult to absorb. So it created a ton of confusion for me. Because she was so loving at the same time, she had to deal with her own trauma.
Right.
And we had to watch that.
Right. We know that as adults, we have the ability to choose how we're responding to a situation, that our choices are ours to make. There's consequences to those choices, whether they're made in good faith or for whatever reason that they're made, there's consequences for them. But as children, you don't always have that same some ability to make those choices.
That's right.
And so you're relying on her, and she's in that place. I mean, it's a terrible place for both adults and children. I mean, it really is, because she's trying to manage, and I am sure she was doing the absolute best she could at that time to try to deal with that. And I suspect that she took those as a way to be able to get some relief. So that she could then be available to you.
That's right.
Because if you go without sleep, you're not going to be available for your children
That's exactly
at all.
right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it was a middle of the day type of thing. It
Right,
was,
absolutely.
trying to get rest at night to escape the trauma, and I needed her, or just whatever the situation might be.
And to process that as a child's mind, like what Marianne was saying, any kind of trauma, which is what you were living with probably since newborn on up, if the abuse was rampant in your home, by the time you have those vivid memories, trying to process that as a child is, well, you don't think like an adult.
You don't. You really don't. And I'll tell you, it kind of created something within me, because my mom and I are so very close even to this day. She's my best friend. But I will tell you, and I'm not ashamed to be able to say it to those listening, I mean, she would tuck me in at night all the way up until I graduated high school. There were nights post all of that trauma that I would actually sleep in bed with her, just as a comfort as I was growing up. So even though there were times that I remember that were so hard to be able to get through, like the example that I shared with you there, it actually did form a pretty tight bond with us going forward in the end. So it was good.
What other kind of incidents do you remember so young as a child?
Those are the main ones. I remember silly things like, really when you think about it, it all stems from his alcoholism, and that's where it all stemmed from. You didn't see the anger or the abuse come out unless there was alcohol consumed. But those events were usually, if I would watch him have alcohol anywhere near you, we as kids knew you likely needed to stay away because you didn't know where it was going to take the evening. I would say fewer and further between that I can recall because I was so young, but those were the type of events. I mean, if I gave you a specific one that actually impacted me, it would be a time that they were fighting and he picked up a bar stool in our kitchen to hit my mother, and instead it hit the chandelier, the lighting fixture above our dining room table, and part of that lighting kind of came down and part of it hit my head, and my sister grabbed me and pulled me out of the dining room and went into the bedroom, and I was perfectly fine, but she was detecting me just to make sure everything was okay. So I remember things like that, especially if I was in the event. I just honestly, there's different events where you just remember different pieces of it. I don't remember fully from beginning to end, but that vivid pictures. I remember the glass coming down and hitting me, and I remember the bar stool going up in the air to hit her. You remember things like that, and that's what kind of sticks with you over time.
I think talking about the alcohol, that's a whole nother conversation to have. That we know that alcohol and substance abuse don't cause domestic violence, but it certainly takes it to that level quicker and often more severely than if drugs and alcohol aren't involved. So I'm thinking about you and your siblings, and you see the alcohol, you see him going to get whatever drinks it is that he's going to be drinking. What do you guys do? Are you guys together as a group? Do you all deal with it individually, or did you find that you guys kind of shared that as something you guys adapted to together?
That's a great question, Marianne. I feel like it just depended on the event or the time or what was going on. I mean, if we were out in public, obviously we were all together. I would say a majority of when this occurred was in the privacy of our own home. And I think large in part we could just be in our bedrooms, or we could be outside doing something when it was happening and we would stumble upon it. Or in general, I felt like it happened in the evenings a lot when we were all off to bed. So sometimes we handled it individually on our own. Sometimes we came together and we dealt with it together as a family. Again, what I remember is being in a situation and being swooped out of the situation. And generally, I remember that happening by my sister pulling me aside.
We hear that a lot, that the older siblings take care of. And sometimes will take the brunt of the abuse, trying to take it away from mom or from the younger siblings. Yep. We hear that.
That's exactly correct. And I will tell you that became the beginning of the end of the violence in our home, is when my mother, after 3 different stints of putting him through rehabilitation, obviously each one lasted for a little bit of time. He would come home clean and things would be better, and then he would stumble and fall back into alcoholism, and then the abuse would continue. But it happened where he turned the anger or the physical abuse and tried to turn it on the children, and that was when my mom said, never, you won't do that. That was when she finally left and got us out of the situation that we were in, was because of that, was turning the potential to turn the abuse to the kids.
When you went to school at a young age, starting kindergarten, first grade, when you were still in the home with your dad, did you notice anything different with any other students? Did you understand their sense of normalcy or not normalcy? Did you have insight? Did your teachers have insight on what was going on in your home?
It's such a great question, Tina. So what I will share with you, even before going into kindergarten and first grade, is I was a pretty good little actor. her. I remember my mom, my grandparents, my mom's mom and dad, they ran a trucker cafe in the city that we grew up in. And she would often take me out there because she would be helping my grandmother with work. And I would run around the restaurant and just very jovial, I would tell stories to anybody really who would listen. I would make up things because I wanted to talk about all things happy. And I think a large part of it was because I wanted to avoid anything that really wasn't what I would see periodically in the home that wasn't happy at that age. I wanted to pretend that it didn't exist. I remember my mom giving me a nickname of social butterfly because of that, because I would go out and storytell. Now, on the flip side of that, when I was in kindergarten, I remember my teacher actually calling my mom and saying, we need to talk. Julie's telling some real tall stories, and we'd like to know what's going on. Is everything okay at home? I was making up happily ever after stories about my father specifically that didn't really exist, and they knew that it was far-fetched. I mean, the stories were just really untrue, and so they knew it just based off of the things that I was coming out and saying with them. Right, I remember her talking to me about it and talking me through it so that I knew that what I was saying was wrong, and that making up these stories wasn't really going to make what had happened to go away. That was kind of my tradition for years to come, is I didn't really talk about it with people. I didn't let people in to know the story. I honestly was ashamed by it for many, many years because I didn't want people to assume that I was the product of a broken home due to domestic violence. So that was really kind of my story. And obviously, Tina, to answer your question, it was because I noticed that there was more normalcy in every other family versus what was in mine. So I wanted to storytell and make it feel like life was different than what it was.
To me, what you're describing is a very, very logical coping skill.
Very logical.
Very logical. Mm-hmm. And it makes sense that you would be doing that. You wanted to create a new existence, a new environment, and you wanted your dad to be this person.
Yes.
And you had to go to the extremes because he was the extreme and the up end of that.
That's right.
So you had to go to that great length to make it a different existence for you.
Yeah.
It just seems so normal to me that would be how you would cope with that. It just makes me sad to think that the shame that was there, and we hear that all the time.
Absolutely.
The shame that goes, and it's just, to me, that's one of the saddest things about the effects of domestic violence, is that the people who have been perpetrated on, who have no responsibility for what's happened to them, are the ones that carry that guilt and that shame.
Absolutely.
And that
It's a wonderful thing to share your story because then the shame is gone.
That's right.
Once it's public.
You're able to release it.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's why it's so courageous when survivors come on and share their stories. So tell me, how has your experience from childhood impacted your life and your relationships up until now, especially with them not knowing the trauma that you'd face?
It's funny because as I was sitting down and preparing for today, I mean, that was one of the things that I thought about. As I was like, Julie, you actually have friends that don't even know why you sit on the board for Hope House. They know you do, and they know you're super passionate about it, but they have no idea why. What's your story? And so I guess I would say, I mean, absolutely, it has had an impact on my relationships because for me, I guess I would say that it's made me super guarded my whole life when it's come to relationships. And even to this day, my friendship circle is very small. I keep people at an arm's length pretty much at all times. I don't let people in. I have a large part of a lack of trust in others, obviously, because of what we went through. For me, that's been impactful because I just haven't been able to build maybe the relationships that other normal children growing up in their adulthood could build normal relationships on because of that experience. And large in part, it's because of the trust.
I think it's interesting to hear you say normal, because what is normal?
It's true.
What does that mean? I think about that a lot because everyone has such very vast different experiences, and people have been through various levels of trauma or things that have happened to them. They're so powerful for the person experiencing it. Even if someone had something different, how do you judge how that rates? It's not an equal thing that you can say, oh, my trauma was worse than your trauma. That it's okay. What you went through was what you went through, and you have survived that, and you have made it through, and you are the most loving, darling people I've ever met in my entire life.
100%.
I'm so serious. I'm going to start crying. I truly. And so I hope that the experiences that you went through brought you to us.
It did.
So
which I'm so grateful for. Yes.
But that also then comes with what you had to go through to bring you to us is what's so hard. Think about that a lot, is how we all tend tend to compare ourselves to other people.
We do.
And we all are just very unique individuals that have experienced what we've experienced.
We have.
And we are who we are today because of where we've walked before. And I think it's how we adapt and how we deal with where we've been that can then just make us how we go forward.
Agree.
I think when you find somebody with some sort of likeness like you have, drop the boundary a little bit, because we started on the board together.
That's
and
right.
It was a great day. And on the board retreat, did an activity called In Her Shoes Together. And we rocked them. We lived. We survived. And it was good.
It was good.
Doing In Her Shoes is a great thing. You shared your story with me. And you had not shared it ever before. No. And it was about the light fixture. Maybe you're not giving yourself the credit you deserve because having firm, healthy boundaries is really not walls up. It's okay.
So true. That's a good perspective.
How has it affected how you're raising your boys?
There's one thing that I can tell you. My mom, she was all things love, no matter what was going on, and even in the depths of some of the most traumatic incidents that she was going through, she would still come out of those incidents with nothing but love to us kids. So she demonstrated that all the time. And I think that that's what I've taken from the experience is just being able to show and shine so much love to my boys, paying attention to them, making sure that their needs are met, almost to the point where I've gone overboard. And honestly, I think probably we do a little bit to make up for a little bit of what I didn't necessarily have. And I guess what I mean by that is most people or families who go through an experience like this, they tend to subliminally ask themselves, what's wrong with me? What did I do that the abuser doesn't love me? Did I do something wrong? Did I cause this? I think they all at some stage kind of go through that. And so that was really for me, the road to healing for me from that question, because I used to ask myself that question all the time when I was young, is what was wrong with me? Was I not good enough to be loved? It was honestly nothing wrong with me. It was not my fault. I did not cause it. I did not create it, nor did my siblings, nor did my mother, that it was a choice that he made. And again, going back to what you had said, Marianne, about the alcoholism, it's really not an excuse. I think he made that an excuse to be able to get away with the beating or to be able to release his anger. That's the best way he could have done it, because I don't think he could have done it sober. I say all that because for me, in raising my children, I want to make sure that they know that they are enough, no matter what they do. I'm always going to shower them with love, no matter how they behave, no matter choices that they make in their life going forward. That's huge for me. I hope that that's reflected in such great men that they've become, young men that they've become to date. I hope that that's reflected in my parenting and loving them the way that I wish that I would have been loved by him, if that makes sense.
It does. And I've met your boys, and I believe you have
Succeeded.
You have succeeded in what you set out to do. You stopped the cycle. Domestic violence is a learned behavior. We see it through generations of families because it's a learned behavior and because it's hard. If you don't have the support and you don't have the people in your corner to help you, then it can go on and on. And so I commend you that you broke that cycle for your family and made new traditions, made new experiences so that your boys didn't have to experience that.
That's exactly right. And I'll tell you, from a pretty young age, even going through what I went through, I was so determined that I was not going to be a product of that experience. So I fought really hard. Like I put my all into my education. I put my all into the work that I did at a very young age. I mean, I started working when I was 12, 13, 14 years of age. I was working just to be able to make sure that I was going to be able to make a life for myself. I also will tell you that I was very determined to become independent. I never wanted to be a codependent person within a relationship, meaning I did not want to have to rely upon my spouse to take care of me financially. I wanted to be able to be independent and make sure that I had the power to take care of myself and my family if I needed to. So that was one of the things that from a very young age that I had learned from this experience, is that I was going to do things different. I was not going to be the product of what had happened. I was going to live my life strong and create the future that I've created for myself, I guess, overall.
And what an amazing thing to be able to determine that at a young age. And then you, not only did you determine that's what you wanted, you made it happen as well. So good on you. That's what I say.
Yes, thank you.
I did also want to just go back for a second too, just because one of the purposes of our talking about this is education, so that people, domestic violence is so complicated and it's so hard for us to understand it. But when you talked about your mom and when the abuse was starting to filter towards the kids, that was That was enough for her. That was her line. And we talk about that a lot. Like, where is your line in the sand? Where is it going to be? So when we're talking with people who are experiencing domestic violence, I don't want to make decisions for them. I don't want to determine what's right for their life and what's not. But they need to do that for themselves. And so we often, that's where we start, is where's your line going to be? What is it going to take for you to say, this is no longer okay, I'm done trying to make it work, I'm done trying to, whatever it is that's happening over there. Often when we're talking to someone who has children, that's it. And I remember talking, I started out as the therapist here, how many ever? Many decades
We always
ago.
say 19 dickety-doo.
Very many moons ago. I heard that all the time. Well, you can beat me, but you can't beat my children. That's often that protective. And often I think people just don't understand, too, that you can protect your children even if you're in that relationship. That often people are like, why don't they just leave? Why are they allowing that to happen? And it's like, okay, let's reframe that. Who's allowing what to happen?
Right.
We need to put the responsibility on the person who is causing the abuse and who is doing the behavior, not the person who's on the receiving end of that. People who are in that relationship and have children, they're doing the best they can do to make sure that they're protecting their children in the way that works for them.
That's right.
And sometimes that doesn't always work, and sometimes there are negative consequences. Kids get removed, or kids don't. Their relationships with mom can be strained or very difficult, but often that love, that protective factor is what is most often driving the survivor.
Absolutely it is. And I'll tell you, I cannot be more appreciative that she made the decision that she did, because I honestly don't know where the 5 of us children, nor her, would be. No, if she would have survived. I don't know where we would be, or if we would have the most productive lives that we all have today, had she not made that sacrifice to say, this is not worth it, I'm saving my children, you won't touch them.
Were there services, or did your mom know about any services available, or were they not?
Not back in the day. I mean, you're talking about so many years ago. I hate to share my age, but you're talking about...
It's okay, I'm older than you.
You're talking about 45 years ago. I would say in terms of the resources available to us that we were blessed to have is 2, our community, which was our church, and then I would say the community of my mother's parents. I mean, we thankfully had my grandparents who bailed us out of a lot of situations, or that was there and very helpful to my mom and us children when we needed them most. But no, when you think about organizations like Hope House and what you bring to the community and the way that you're able to support the community, none of that existed. I think that was also one of the reasons why I was so enamored being in Kansas City all these years and trying to find my future place in terms of how I could support the community, and why I searched so hard to be able to find that connection that I really needed. And that's when I found Hope House, was because I wanted to make sure that I was giving back and helping in a community because of the fact that we didn't have resources when we were growing up. And thankfully we had family unit that was able to help, and the church that was able to help, but besides that, it's tough. When I think about those that are listening to the podcast today, I think that's one of the things that I would definitely recommend for them, is use the plethora of resources that are out there for you. We didn't even have a hotline back then. The simplicity of a hotline has changed things for people now. So you've got hotlines, and you've got advocacy, and you've got Hope House and other organizations in the community that can really help if you don't have trusted advisors, or if you don't have family members that can help you, or if you don't have a church that can step in and provide you the support that you need. I think there's a plethora of resources out there now, which is the advantage versus what we had when I was young.
I think what's also really important to remember is that people listening to this podcast are coming from all over. So Hope House may not be the resource that's available to someone if they're in a different state or a different country. There is a national hotline, and we'll have that posted as well, that you can call to get information about wherever you are in the country. And the websites and the online resources that are available are amazing, that you can find information more readily than what you were able to do before. So I'm really grateful we have those options as well.
That's right. And I guess I would say on top of that is, it feels like because of the availability of those resources, you have more people who want to help.
Right.
More people that you would know can help you, or that want to shower you with love and support to get you through what you're going through. Makes a difference.
There's a lot of childhood victims of domestic violence that are adults now, like you are. But I want to bring it down a little more personally to you. What would you tell 5-year-old Julie today?
Such a good question. I think I would tell 5-year-old Julie the same thing that I would tell those listening today, which is there is hope on the other end, and that you can get through this. You're stronger than you think you are. Don't be ashamed. Be willing to share your story. Tell others. Seek help. or seek advice or seek guidance, don't do it on your own. I think those are the things that come to mind, as I would have told myself if I could, that there's hope and that you'll get through it on the other end, and that what you're going through absolutely does not have to define you, so don't let it.
That's extremely powerful.
That's extremely powerful. What are some misconceptions and stereotypes about domestic violence that you want to lay out on the table?
For me, I think people are misguided in thinking that domestic violence only happens to codependent people or people are in impoverished communities, and that just couldn't be further from the truth. It absolutely happens to everybody around us. I've known colleagues, I've known friends who have either been touched by something like this, domestic violence, either through their network or through loved ones of their own. And these people are flourishing in careers, they're flourishing in their family units. I think it's a misnomer that people just assume that it's people who can't help themselves. And I think my mom's a strong testament to the fact that she, in the end, became an accomplished, obviously now retired nurse, but she's a very independent woman, always has been, strong in her faith, rooted in her faith. I think that that's probably the biggest misconception I think people have out there, is that it can't happen to anyone, or that you might bring it on yourself because you're not taking the ability to leave the situation in the first place, and it's just not that easy. It's not that easy. You have to factor in what's happening in the home unit, the children that could be involved, the financial scenarios also could come into play. You don't know people's financial situations. It could be anything.
The threats, the coercion, knowing that 75% of the homicides are post-separation. That's a big reason to stick around for a little bit,
exactly
to
right.
safely get out somehow.
That fear in itself is huge. Or, just like anybody, change is hard no matter what the situation is that you're going through. Change is hard if you're going through this domestic violence situation. Change is also hard if you change a job, for example. It's no different. And I think people find it difficult to be able to do change because they don't know what's on the other side of it.
As long as your abuser hasn't sabotaged that position or the job
That's right.
that you're in, because that's one of the barriers to leaving.
That's right.
Is the sabotage.
Yeah.
Thinking about change, there's also the hope that change will occur.
That's right.
Yes.
That you're hoping that person will change their behavior.
Absolutely.
Because it's not that you don't love the person. Your mother loved your father.
She did.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
So that makes it really difficult too. Have you found any resources or organizations particularly that's helped in your journey of healing and recovery? I know service to Hope House. You were on board for 5 years?
Yes, that's right. The organization for I think 7 now, but yeah, I've been a part of the board for the last 5. So yes, that's right. This organization absolutely has been helpful to me. Just watching what staff do on a daily basis to be able to help our community has been very rewarding for me, to be able to be a part of that and to be able to hear that the smallest part of the contributions from my company or my support that I give to the organization is able to help in such an important and strong way. I would say that's really the main thing, is I would say just watching this organization grow and do what it's able to do in the community. It's been tremendous.
Yeah, the growth has been amazing, and I love that Hope House asks their survivors, what do you need? What barriers do we need to take down for you? And that's how programs are birthed.
That's right.
Is what the survivor needs, and I've always had a lot of respect for that.
That's right.
What kind of supports or counseling did you get in your healing journey?
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I will tell you that because I buried these feelings so deep for so many years and ignored that they actually were problematic or could become problematic for me in the future, I never did seek help. And like I had said earlier in our conversation, this wasn't really a topic that post my mom leaving my father, post my mom getting remarried. It wasn't something that we talked about all the time. It was more of we kind of lived it and then we forgot about it and tried to move on from there. Surely there were occasions where it was brought up here and there, but it definitely wasn't something that we got counseling for back at that age to be able to help us children work through it from that, right? I didn't get help then, and so why would I get help through the rest of my life? And so it's been interesting though, because I will tell you, because of burying things so very deep like I have, I've started to notice things surfacing as I've aged in life. A lot of things. Like I would tell you, in most recent months, I would say the trigger has been the loss of a very dear friend of mine last year. And post that loss of her, I started to find myself completely not content with anything. What I was doing career-wise, personally on the personal level. Not that I'm unhappy, more that I just want more more out of things. I need more out of things to feel fulfilled. And I think I realized that I'm searching for things that I didn't get during that traumatic period of my life. At this age in life, after all these years, it's finally surfacing. And I have been, right, through guidance of family members, through guidance of friends, I've had multiple people tell me, you really have got to seek counsel and you've really got to seek some support. And that was at that point when I reached out to you, Tina, and said, I'd like to tell my story because I'd like to start this journey towards healing. So obviously this is a first step for me, talking through some of these things very openly with you, openly with the masses of people who may be listening to this. But I absolutely intend to take care of myself and meet with someone at a more intimate level to make sure that I'm working on myself. It's important. It's finally time for me to be able to bring things to surface and be able to let things go fully so that I can heal. And honestly, I'm really hopeful that by taking this first step that I can heal these issues that have been going on with me most recently about contentment. I'm looking for something that's better. I need to define, well, what does better even really mean? And kind of close that loop. So ultimately, I think that's the healing path that I'm looking towards. So we'll see where it takes me.
Sounds like the right path.
If you're able, how are things with your siblings and your mom at this point?
That's great. I think that that's really what I wanted to be able to say when I think about getting the message across to those that are listening today is that, again, like I mentioned before, there's absolutely hope in the future. When you think about what you're going through right now, you will get through it. There are people to be able to help you and get you on the other side of that, and that was what happened for me and my family. I will say that I have and had a really brave mother who made the decision to be able to step away, protect her children, do the right thing to save us, and in the end that brought us out of some of the challenges that we were undergoing. And I think as you think about the years that followed, albeit we all had some challenges, we all have some hang-ups that have occurred over the years, and I'll even go as far as to say we probably even had some internal demons that we've all fought here and there because of what we went through. But you're talking about a very successful, productive, happy family. A retired nurse, that was my mom. I have an older sister who is thriving in her marriage with her beautiful family. She's an analyst for a company that she works for, very successful, doing well. I have a brother who is an entrepreneur. He's also a CPA, so he has done well for his life, and his beautiful family are thriving. I have another brother, the list just can go on and on. I have a big family. I have another brother who's a manager in the job that he has, and his beautiful family is thriving as well. And then I have another brother who's a lawyer who is also doing really well in his livelihood too. When you think about all of us, right, even myself, I'm a vice president in the company that I work for as well, and so flourishing. But I guess when you think about it from the perspective of where we came from, the start that we had that was so startling and really hard to be able to go through, it's amazing for me to be able to tell you that this is where we've all ended up. We're flourishing, thriving, productive people on the other end, and I absolutely can only say that that is absolutely due to the fact that my mother made the decision that she made to get us out of the pit that we were in. I still think about that all the time. I don't know that we would be where we're at today. I don't know if we'd all still be living in that town. I don't know if we'd be having the relationships that we have. I don't know if my mother would have been a survivor necessarily. Who knows what the events would have been like in years to come. But today, because of that hope, we're all strong, flourishing individuals, both in our careers and in our personal lives with our families. And I think that that's a testament because of her strength. And I also want to make sure that I include the foundational faith that she has and that our family has. I grew up in a very strong-rooted, Christian-based home, and I will tell you that her belief that God was going to take us and carry us through those challenges absolutely resonates to this day. We're all very strong in our faith to this day, and we're thankful that we had him and his guidance and protection over us all those years.
The hope is as well that there is life after domestic violence. There really, really is.
There is.
And I know, and I've heard people talk before, that sometimes you can't see the forest through the trees, but it's a call. You can text 911. There's more discreet ways of planning your safety plan, your strategic escape, I always call it, because that's what it definitely was for my family. And there are people out there that want to help domestic violence survivors. If you're a childhood domestic violence survivor, you can call our hotline for information on counseling or whatever you need, and they have the resources to guide and direct you to wherever you would need to go to get help. National Domestic Violence Hotline will definitely post, and then of course our hotline always. What are some final thoughts that are important to you that you want to make sure before we're off air today?
Yeah, that's great. I guess what I would say is, first, just to say thank you for you both giving me an outlet today to be able to finally say story, some of the things that I had actually gone through and how I had processed through it, how my family had processed through it. I have felt a bit of a relief just being able to talk about it so openly with the two of you, so thank you for that. And then I think I would say to those, if you are going through the experience, or if you're close to someone that's going through the experience, again, I can't emphasize enough that you're stronger than you may think you are in this moment right now as you're going through it, that there is hope on the other side of things, that there is help on the other side of things. I cannot stress enough. Do not be ashamed. Do not keep what's happening inside. Talk with others. Seek the help that you need, because I can guarantee you there are people that are out there that want to love on you and support you and get you through it. And then I guess I would say also for those that have, like myself, gone through the experience, and you're still kind of healing from it, or you're still processing through your years of what you went through, I would say it's okay to talk about it. And it's okay to share your story. And I actually implore people to do what I've done and get engaged in your community and provide the support and give back, because you don't know how many people are actually out there that really need you and need that support. So give back, I think, would be the other thing that I would say. Give back to your community, help others, especially if you were helped, to just show the love to others the way that people were able to show love to you.
Thank you so much for your story. I just
so grateful to be.
Love you so much. Thank you so much.
Too. Thank you.